Hey everybody, it's Tiffycuss, aka TNT, aka Tiffany, and welcome back to my channel. So things are very busy, but I'm very excited because in a few days I'm going to be heading to Star Wars Celebration, which is a 4-day long convention, which is everything and all things Star Wars. The first time I went was an absolute blast, so when they announced they were doing it again, my friends and I jumped at the opportunity. It was supposed to take place in 2020, but due to the pandemic, it got rescheduled to 2022. So thankfully, in a few days, I'm gonna be heading there. I do have a fair amount of Star Wars cosplays, however, they are very warm. So with it taking place in California and the weather's supposed to be 90 degrees on a daily basis, I'm not sure how many of them I'm going to be wearing. There was a cosplay that I wore in 2019 when I originally went. It was literally thrown together the day before I left. Very messy, but it was totally fun. And it was a mix of Leia and Aladdin Sane David Bowie. So it was kind of just like a Rebel Leia mashup, and I absolutely loved it. I got a lot of compliments on it. So my thought process is I want to remake it and get it up to a little bit better of a quality and just absolutely have fun with it, and probably wear that around a lot since it's not as warm as a white winter jumpsuit from Hoth. So yes, I plan on remaking that for the convention that I'm leaving for in 2 days. Okay, I'll let them know. Yeah, BB-8 thinks I'm crazy. I know that wasn't much of an intro, but I'm a little short on time and have a lot to do, so let's get into it. So when I originally put the costume together, I had just used a white tunic dress I had gotten off of Amazon. There's nothing wrong with that. I just wanted to make something that might be a little bit closer to Leia's real dress, just to be a little bit more recognizable. Also, this ended up being very see-through. So I want to make something that has a little bit more coverage to it. I'm not going with exact Leia's dress just because I do want to make it more of kind of an interpretation. So the pattern I'm using is going to be a simplicity pattern. It originally has darts in the front, but I might end up doing like a gather or a ruching that's going to be hidden by a belt. So I'll figure that out when I get a little bit closer, but for now it's time to get everything cut out. I'm using the last of the fabric to recreate the same style hood that Leia wore in A New Hope. Because there was such little fabric, I didn't really measure this part, but I did make sure that all the edges were straight, just so it was a long rectangular piece. There was no way I was going to get away this time with using black thread since the dress is completely white. So this time I did make sure to take the time to completely change over my serger from black thread to white thread. I prefer to serge my pattern pieces whenever possible because I do tend to put my cosplays through a lot of wear and tear, and I like to make sure that they can hold up as long as possible. Assembly is starting out by attaching the back pieces to the front piece at the shoulder seams. I'm then taking this straight edge of the cuff and folding it over twice to create a rolled hem. This is another reason I really like to serge my pieces, as it makes making a rolled hem so much easier. I then attach that to the bottom of the sleeve with the right sides together. Now because this is a curved hem, I'm making sure to clip away some of the bulk of the seam allowance to make sure that it will lay flatter when it's folded right side out. And top stitching this in place. Next is attaching the sleeve to the arm side. To close the sides of the dress, I'm starting by pinning together the cuffs, right sides together, pinning that all the way down through the armpit, down the side seam, and stitching that all together in one go. I'm not putting the zipper in this dress, so to make sure that I can get it on and off, I am leaving a good amount of space, enough to fit my head through from where I know that the top of the collar is going to be. This next part can be a little complicated, so I'm going to try to explain it as best that I can. I'm folding over the raw edge of the top of the collar and then folding in the seam allowance from the back seam to create a nice clean edge. Once that's pinned down and I know it's not going anywhere, I'm folding where I had previously marked it in order to make the finished collar. I've never made one quite like this before, but that's the way that the base pattern had originally wanted me to do it. After that's pinned, I'm going to continue to finish the back seam by just folding and pinning down the rest of the seam allowance. Repeating these steps for the other piece. I'm finishing the slit in the back with one continuous seam by starting down one side. I stitch past the opening of the slit a few stitches, and then making sure my needle is still in the fabric, I'm opening the presser foot and rotating it 90 degrees, in this case stitching across the entire seam. I rotate the presser foot again and then stitch back up the entire other side. I decided to top stitch the collar piece as close to the edge as possible to make sure that the seam allowance stayed in place. Then I folded under the rest of the collar, making sure to encase the raw edge inside. Next up is the hood. This style of hood is actually open all the way through the back, so to make sure that everything looks clean, I'm going to be doing another rolled hem on all the edges. Using the longest stitch length possible and no back stitching, and then running 2 gathering stitches along both of the shortest sides of the hood. This then gets pinned to the outside of the dress at the bottom of the collar, gathering it to make sure that it fits between the back seam and the shoulder seam. And then stitching this down and repeating the same thing on the other side. To make sure that the back closes and stays in place, I'm adding 2 hook and eye closures, one at the top of the collar and one at the bottom of the collar. Alright, so the main dress is done, so now it is the fun part where we get to do all of the detailing. So the first time that I did the costume, I ended up putting the text on the chest by making a stencil out of cardboard and then hand painting it. It did bleed through, it did not stay very well, and was kind of hard to read. So this time when I'm remaking it, I'm going to be using my Cricut, which has honestly become my favorite tool that I own, and I use it for everything now. And then to put the text on, I'm going to be using some red iron-on. I did do a test patch to make sure that my fabric would not melt under the heat of the iron, so that is a good thing to test beforehand. So the next step is going to be adding the text, and then after that is where we're kind of going to destroy the dress.
Now, I didn't design this image. This was just one I found off of Google when I originally made the dress. I just imported this into Cricut Design Space, making sure it was the exact size that I wanted. Although I didn't show myself doing it, make sure you always mirror the image if you're going to be using iron-on to make sure that it is the right way once you attach it to whatever you're designing. This probably has to be my favorite part of using the Cricut. Honestly, weeding off the excess material is probably one of the most satisfying things ever. I pinned the dress to my ironing board to make sure it stayed in place so I wouldn't get any movement while I was ironing this down. And then once it cooled, this is so satisfying.
I absolutely love how the vinyl turned out. So now what's going to happen is it's time to distress and maybe use some safety pins to put things back together after tearing them apart. I've also decided that I am going to kind of cut and rip off the hem to give it that really jagged feel after putting in all that work to serge everything to keep it nice. But that's the look I'm going for, so crossing my fingers I don't cut off too much.
The dress ended up being pretty much exactly the length that I wanted, so I just made sure to cut off the serged edge, making sure to kind of make it jagged and not very neat, and then stretching it and using my fingernails to kind of rough it up and scratch at it. I decided I wanted to cover one cuff completely in safety pins, so I just made sure to line those up going all the way around. This took a lot longer than I was expecting, and it ended up having a lot of heft and weight to it, but I really like how it turned out. I didn't really have a rhyme or a reason of where I placed the rest of the safety pins. It was just kind of random. In certain spots I put just safety pins, and in other places I decided that I was going to rip it and tear it apart and put it back together. With the dress finished, it was time to work on the belt. This was just one I had purchased off of Amazon. It reminded me of Leia's original belt, so I thought it was very reminiscent, but we're also going to be adding studs to it, just to give it that little bit of rebel flair. After laying out a rough idea of what I was kind of wanting to do, it was time to actually attach the studs. I originally tried to use the cutting tool that they gave me with a hammer, but it just did not want to go through the material. So I tried to widen the holes with the screwdriver. Funny enough, the studs that I picked ended up matching the original fasteners perfectly. I eventually gave up on the cutting tool and tried to switch to a hammer and nail. Again, the holes were way too small, so I still had to use the screwdriver to widen them. Eventually, I remembered that I had an awl, which made attaching the rest of the studs so much faster and easier. I ended up having a bunch of leftover studs, so I decided to add some to the dress.
Now it is very late, so I really need to get packed to get some sleep, and I'll see you at the convention.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I absolutely love how this turned out. By the time you saw it though, it had gone through a couple days of the convention and also getting spilled on. It's crazy seeing me go from this to this. The progress was fantastic. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button and let me know if you have any ideas you'd like to see me do. Thanks guys.
Kona, do you like Star Wars too? Yeah? Cool.